Because I do know that everyone is sort of at a different level in their like programming abilities. So we sort of wanted this to be something that everyone can hopefully make the most out of, whether you have no experience or you do have some experience in programming. So for today's structure, I was thinking we can talk a little bit more about C++, introduce sort of the basics of it, and then get started on understanding the variables and sort of some of the logical operators. And then we will do also a couple of examples today, so a few practice problems. And then for future classes, we'll do some more examples and a little bit less of the lecturing, so you guys can have some more time to just try different things. And then near the end of the class, so like the last week or so, the last two classes, we'll introduce a final project. So you guys will be able to make some sort of gamer application, and we can talk more about that as we get closer to that. But you'll be able to use that, or you'll get to spend those last couple of weeks sort of working on that. Also, let's make sure that we're only using the chat for education purposes. I'm seeing a lot of people sharing their birthdays. I think we'd all prefer that we have some security. So how about we don't share birthdays or emails? And then someone did ask if we will have homework. There will be a few assignments, but they'll be largely optional. So I'll just include a few practice problems that you can do over the week to like just keep your skills up. And then I'll also link the slideshow in the Google Classroom after the class is over, so you can go back and look at it, or if you're gone and you're watching from the recording, you can go look at that. All right, so let's get started with some of the basics and then an introduction to variables. So to begin, let's just talk about like what is C++. So C++ is an object-oriented programming language. Object-oriented basically just means that it's built on like this concept of objects, and each object has its own properties or attributes. While object-oriented programming, I mean, that's like a large component of C++, that is a little bit more on like the complex end of it. So we likely won't get to that this class. That includes like the classes and the objects as part of C++. But if you do continue to learn more on your own, that would be a big part that you'll learn about. And C++ is actually used to create a variety of applications, things like games, operating systems, databases. So things like, I think it's World of Warcraft. Sorry, I don't really know games. And then Netflix and YouTube, the Mac operating system, all of those are used or built with C++. So how do we actually code in C++? To code in C++, we need a text editor and a compiler. So the text editor is basically where you write the code, and then the compiler is used to convert the source code, which is like the code that you're writing, and it takes that source code and it converts it into machine code. So basically code that your computer can actually understand and then execute. So like oftentimes the text editor would be something like Notepad, and then there are various compilers you can get off of the internet. Another very popular solution is an integrated development environment, or an IDE. And this is basically like a text editor and a compiler, but in one application. And so you can edit, you can execute, and then you can debug stuff. So like when I was learning C++ in school, we used Visual Studio. That's a very popular one. But for the purpose of this class, I know that not everyone has access to a computer, so we'll just be using a web-based IDE. And I'll link this in the chat in a few minutes when we start working with it. But basically, this is all the, it can do basically all the things that Visual Studio can, so it's a pretty good resource. You can also save projects and create an account. So we'll work on that in a few minutes. But basically, as I said, C++ uses a compiler. Not all programming languages do use compilers. Okay, so compilers, as I said, you take the source code, which is the stuff you write, it goes through the compiler, is changed into machine code, which is like a low-level language, while your source code is a high-level language. And then this machine code, the machine interprets it, and then you get an output. Some languages use an interpreter instead, which is basically you have the source code that you write, and the interpreter works line by line to sort of decode it and then execute it, and then you get an output. So with C++, since it's compiled, everything is interpreted at the end of the sequence, at the end of the code, versus the interpreter, it'll work line by line through your code. So the compiler is actually faster in executing your program, which is why C++ is so popular. So I'm just going to look at the chat for a second. Oh, I do see something else. Okay. So great question. So C++ is not necessarily an app people use to code. C++ is like a programming language. So think of it as something like Java or Python, if you've heard of those. It's like basically like almost like a new language that you're using that the computer can understand and sort of use as a translator. So to get started, we can start by learning a little bit about variables. So I'm sure you guys have started learning about variables in math. Things like X or Y, right? When you're graphing or solving systems of equations. And basically in math, when you're using variables, you're using them in place of a number. Like it might be an unknown number, or it might be a number that's constantly changing. So in this case, variables are used in programming as well. Similar to in math, we basically use them to like quantify a known or unknown value. So if you guys could stop spamming in the chat, that would be great. Thank you. So basically, we're using these different variables in order to like symbolize values that we may know or not know. And so in C++ and in programming in general, there are a variety of different variables you can use. So one is like int, which is an integer number. So that'd be a whole number that does not have a decimal. Then there's double, which is a floating point number. So you can use any value with a decimal. These are the two that we'll be working with most today. But there's also characters. So that'd be one letter. Strings, which is a sequence of characters, so like words or sentences, and then a Boolean or bool. And that's a true or a false. And this one is a little bit more complicated, so we won't be going much into that in this class. But we will be mainly focusing on your integers, doubles, so values with decimals, and then strings. All right. Okay. So now that I have introduced variables a little bit, I'll come back to this and we can take a break and make an account. So I'll put this link in the chat. All right, if you guys could stop typing in the chat, if it's not relevant to the class, that'd be good, because I'd like people to be able to access the link and it sort of goes away. You guys keep chatting. All right, so if you could click on the link that I had sent, then I'd like everyone to create an account. So I'll just log out. Basically, you're going to come over to the left side here and click sign up. And then I'd like you to just sign up by putting your name, email, and then making a password and clicking register now. And this is the IDE that we'll be using for this class. So basically, with this, you can type all your code, and by making an account, you'll actually be able to save this to the account, so you can access it from anywhere. All right, has everyone made an account? If you haven't, you could just raise your hand and Is anyone having, Grace, are you having trouble making an account or do you just need a couple more minutes?
No, you told us to raise our hand once we're done.
Oh, I just meant if you weren't done. That's okay.
Oh, oopsies.
All right, then it looks like everyone has an account made, which is awesome. So I'm just gonna quickly log in. All right. So this is going to be your account for this class. And as I said, you'll be making all your projects in here and you can save them. So we can use these over the next few weeks. So make sure you remember your login. If your device can save it, that'd be a lot easier. Okay, so now that we have the account made, I'll just go back and finish up on variables. Okay, so these are the different types of variables. We have the int, double, and string that we'll mostly be working with. And to create, actually, sorry, we're just gonna continue with this. I think this makes more sense. Okay, so we're gonna begin by doing Hello World. So if you guys have done programming before, Hello World is sort of like the basic starter to any programming language. Basically, you're going to have your program say the words Hello World. So also for the chat, please stop chatting. That'd be awesome. It's a little bit distracting. Okay, so for Hello World, I would like you to go, you might need to split screen. Open up the web IDE. And I'm sort of just gonna walk you through the basics of C++ with like the Hello World. So one of the first things that we always need to do when we're using C++ is we need to change the header. So right now they have the studio.h, and studio.h is a file which basically is used for like input and output functions in C++. But we won't be using studio.h. We'll instead be using something called iostream. So I'll type that here, and I'd just like you to copy this into your program. iostream basically means input and output stream. So it's another function, or it's another header used for input and output functions. Okay, and then the other thing that you're going to do, and you're going to do this every time you're using C++, is you're going to write using namespace std, which basically means using the standard namespace. So you'll have access to all the standard values, or the standard, like the objects and variables from the standard library of C++. So these two things we'll always be doing. So I hope everyone's got that. The next thing we're going to do is print hello world. But instead of using the print function, printf, we're going to be using cout. And the reason for this is because cout is like a way to print things to the computer. And then we'll be using like its opposite function, cin, to receive things from the user. So cout, and then we're going to do 2 of the less than signs, the quotation marks, and then you can write hello world, or whatever message you want to be your first message. And then you do a semicolon. A semicolon basically indicates that the line is over. So that's sort of the code for that line. All right, so if you're here, then we're going to click run. Oh, and select the language. And the language to select would be C++. And so as you can see, right below in the dialog, in the little bottom thing, it has executed your code and it says hello world. If you aren't here, let me know and we can sort of catch you up. Okay. So basically, you've officially done your first code, which is awesome. you've had your computer say hello world. So now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to get introduced to variables and then learn how to do this, but also take an input from the user. So right now we were just having the computer say hello world. The next step will be to have the computer say something and ask for something from us, from the user, and then be able to put something into the computer and have the computer say something based off of what we are telling the computer. So I'll go back to the slides. All right, now we're ready for variables. So as I said, we have three main variables that we'll be working with: the integer, the double, which is like your decimal, and then the string, which is words. And so to create a variable, you have to specify the type of the variable and then give it a value. So the type, for example, it could be integer. So you'd write int and then the variable name. So I want to call this integer num. So I'd say int num equals, and then I give it a value. So like 1. Also, you could assign the value later. So you could declare the variable, say int num. So I'm saying, specifying the type, which is an integer. And then I'm saying, like, what's it called? And then later I'm saying this number, or the num variable, is equal to the value of 1. So we'll try that, but with user inputs. So as I showed you earlier, cout is a way to like have the computer say stuff, to print stuff. Cin is the like action we'll use to have the user input things. So I'm going to share we can go back to the program and I'll show you how this works. And if you want to save this, you could just click save and name that hello world. And then we can do create new project. All right. So does anyone remember what we include in the heading instead of studio.h?
IO stream?
Yeah, exactly, IO stream. So IO and then stream. And then just close that with the greater than sign.
Wait, what do we name our new file?
You could just name this like user input or my name. All right, and does anyone remember the other thing we're going to include in this header? Yep, using namespace.
Namespace std.
Yeah, nice. So this is basically to say, hey, we're using the standard namespace. And the reason for this is if we didn't include this, you just have to include a lot more words. So like if I didn't include that, instead of just saying cout, I'd have to say std dot or semicolon semicolon cout. And that's just a lot more work. It decreases your efficiency. So we just include the using namespace std. All right, and we're not using printf. So I'm going to delete that. So in this one, in this user input, I'm going to have you guys try and say your name to the computer and have the computer like say hello and your name back. So we'll start by saying cout and have the computer say something unique. Enter your name. We can just have a semicolon, and then and then we're going to enter our name. So we want to cin and our name, right? That would be the name of the variable. So we need to declare this variable. So is our name an integer, a decimal, or a string?
String.
Yeah, nice. So we're going to say string, and we're going to name this variable name because it's our name. And I'll show you guys how to comment right now. Commenting is really important in programming so that other people can read your code and they can understand it. So to do a single line comment, you just do 2 of the forward slashes. So I'll just write variables so everyone knows that these are my variables up here. All right. So I'm going to say C out, enter your name. So the computer will say enter your name. And then C in, name. So we're going to enter our name. So let's run this and see what happens. Enter your name. All right, I'm going to say my name. So it got my name, but it didn't say my name back. Does anyone know why?
When you only did C and you didn't do C out again.
Exactly. So we're going to go back and we're going to say C out. All right, what do we want the computer to say to us?
Hi, name.
Hi and name. Sounds good. All right, so to do that, you can do hi, and you can just do a plus sign, and then name. There's one other way you can do this. You could do C out. You can go hi, and then just another 2 arrows, and then name. So I'll just run that and show you how that looks. Oh no, they put them both on the same line. I don't like how that looks. All right, so let's add a new line. To add a new line, you're just going to do another plus sign, or you could do this. Plus sign, and then the quotation marks. And this time you're going to do a backslash, not a forward slash, and then the letter N. And that basically just means new line. So we can run that one more time. And now it's saying hi Shreya, and then hi Shreya again, because I was just showing you the 2 different ways. And this is actually really important. I messed this up today. But basically, if you're using a string with words, you can use the plus sign. But if you're not using a string, if you're using an integer, you have to use these 2 like arrows. That's just how C++ is. So the plus sign can only be used with the same data type. So like these are letters, so letters can be used with letters since that's your string. But if it was a number, it wasn't a string, then I'd have to use these 2. Oh, and I saw someone who asked a question. Thanks for answering, Lawrence. But yeah, CN basically just takes the input from the user and puts it into the computer. So C out is saying, hey, enter your name. CN takes the name from the user, and then C out again says the name out loud. Back to the user. All right. It looks like so.
What does the /n and then the name thing after that do?
Yeah, good question. So the /n says new line. So when I'd gotten rid of that, it put hi Shreya and then hi Shreya on the same exact line. And here I can show you that. But basically then it makes them, it runs into each other. You see that down here?
Oh, why are we printing it out twice?
I was just showing the 2 different ways to connect words and variables. So you can use a plus sign, or you can use the 2 arrows.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And the plus sign will only work with strings, which is why the 2 arrows is really important. Or like the same data type. So if you have a number and a number, the plus sign works. But if you have a number and a string, then you have to use the 2 arrows. So it looks like someone had some questions in the chat. So basically what we're doing, and this is like standard for all your code, you gotta make sure you include the IO stream. You gotta make sure you're using the standard namespace. And then you start by declaring your variables. So in this one, we use the variable string name because obviously your name is a word, it's not a letter, and it's not a number. Then we have the computer say enter your name. We have the user enter their name. And then we have the computer output the name with the word. All right. So does anyone have any questions before we move on? Do you want me to? Yeah, I can copy just the entire thing and send it in the chat. And I have it in the slides as well, and the slides will be available on the Google Classroom shortly after the class is over. All right. If we don't have any other questions, then I'm going to move on to sort of the next step. All right, so the next thing I'm going to have you guys try is returning the sum of three numbers. So we can sort of go through it together, but I want you to begin by declaring variables. So if you have three numbers, think what type of variable would you want? Do you think we want ints? Do we want doubles? Or do we want strings? Anyone have any ideas?
How do you create a new file?
I can go through that. Yeah, I'll go through that in a couple minutes. Right now, we're just gonna sort of plan. We're gonna plan how we would approach this.
You can make three integer variables by doing int a semicolon, int b semicolon, int c semicolon.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So we could do three different integers. And then once we declare these variables, then since we want to return the sum of three numbers, we'd want to get the three numbers from the users. So we'd use cout and say something like enter the first number. And then we'd use cin to get that number back. And we do that 3 times to get each number. And we want to add all the numbers and then return the sum to the users. Oh, thank you, Jenny. Okay, so I will go back and show you guys how to make a new file. All right, so I'm going to save this. So click save at the top. I'm going to name it my name. Click save. If you don't have an account, I'm not sure if you can save it. Then on the left side, you're going to create new project. And we'll begin by writing these things. All right, so what's the first thing we got to include?
iStream.
Yeah, IO stream. So IO, like input, output, and then stream. And we're going to close it. All right, and the other thing we use?
Using namespace std.
Yep, so that's our standard namespace. All right. So we want to get 3 values from our user, add them together, and then give the user the value again. So someone suggested we use ints. So we'll just name them ints A, B, and C. So there's a lot of ways you can do this. If you want, you can just write int A, comma B, comma C. Or you could do int A, semicolon, int B, semicolon, int C, semicolon. So you can do it just any way you'd like to. Angela, for your code run button not working, does it say error or is it just not running for you? Interesting. Maybe you could try refreshing the website or reloading it. And if you don't have an account, then it may not let you save, which may make it difficult to run. All right, so these are the 2 different ways you can declare your variables. So I'm just going to use the first one because it's a little bit easier, more streamlined. Oh, Angelina, I was talking to someone else. You're good. All right, so right here, we've declared our variables. Okay, so our next step is to get the variables from our user, right? So what function do we use? to tell the user what they need, or tell the user what we want, and then get it from them. We can start with cout. We could say enter the first number. All right, then what do we do? Cn. What are we getting from the user?
Integer A.
We can just say Cn A and then semicolon. All right, so then we do that again, right? Cout, enter the second number. This time we're getting the value B from our user. We do that one more time. All right, so now we've got the three numbers from our user, A, B, and C. So we want to give the user the sum. And when you're adding things in C++, you add just like you add in math. So for example, if we're trying to get the perimeter, we just do 2 times the length variable plus 2 times the width variable, and then just put a semicolon at the end. So it's pretty much just like math, which makes it very straightforward. So in this case, how would we make the sum? What would that be?
You could do A plus B plus C.
All right, so we've created our 3 variables that we want to make the sum of. We got the first variable from the user, which is right here. Got the second variable from the user right here. And this is our third variable. So now we want to create the sum, which is just A plus B plus C. Now we need to make this sum and tell it to the user, right? We need to tell them what we're actually getting. So to do that, I'm going to make another variable called int sum. We can just say the sum equals A plus B plus C. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then we want to output the sum. So how do we output again?
Cout sum.
So we just say cout. And because the sum is a variable, we're not going to do the quotation marks. So the quotation marks, if I did quotation mark sum, then it would just say the word sum. And I don't want the word sum, I want the actual sum. So I'm just going to get rid of the quotation marks, and then it'll output the variable. So we could say something like, the sum is space, and then it will say the sum. All right, so let's try this. All right, what's our first number? The 10. Oh, 1, okay.
1, 2, 3.
And I see 12. All right, it says the sum is 18. Is that right?
Can you send the code into the chat?
I'll put it in the chat.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Why is there always a semicolon after?
Oh, great question. So the semicolon will basically tell the computer that this is the end of the line. Like in sum, this is all we've got on this line. Then we'll move on to the next one.
Okay, thanks.
And you do need the semicolon. I think that's something that a lot of people will often forget, and I don't think I stress that enough. But the semicolon is really important. Like if I get rid of the semicolon right here and I try and run it, we'll get a big error. So see how it says expected semicolon? So we're just gonna add that semicolon back and then one other important thing in coding, which can be frustrating at times, is you need to be using the same typing style. So if you said sum with a lowercase s, you need to be using sum with a lowercase s here and here. Otherwise, it won't interpret it correctly. Same with like int needs a lowercase I. So don't write that with an uppercase. That will not work. All right. Any other questions about this one?
I've seen this number a lot, like in the error code. Like if your number's too high, it just gives you this weird 21474508882 thingy.
Interesting. I'll look
For a
into
lot of codes.
Sorry, what?
I always see like this weird error code. Like this like negative 2147 thingy.
Yeah, I see. I'll look into that and let you know next week. That's kind of interesting. It's probably just like it.
Oh, I know why, I think. Is it because the variable int can't store that many digits or characters?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Interesting. All right. So has everyone? Oh, someone else shared. Awesome. Looks like you put Hello World in it. Nice. Okay, so now we'll move on to one more example. And I think this one is a little bit more complicated, but I think you guys can try that on your own and give you pretty good practice. All right, so this one is calculating the area of a triangle. You could do the area of a rectangle if you wanted to instead. Either is fine. So I want you to start by getting the base and height lengths from the user, then calculate the area, and then output the answer. All right, so I'll leave this up and you guys can start working on it. So I would recommend starting by declaring your variables. We make a height variable, a base variable, and then an area variable. And then get those values from your user, and then output the answer. And when you're done, you can put it in the chat and we can sort of look at the different ways people did it. Great question. Someone asked if C++ was a multiplication function. So their multiplication is just like it is in math. So you just do like, let's say you were doing height times width. You just do height star width.
Is there an exponential function?
Sorry, what?
Exponential.
Yeah, I think there is. I haven't used it, but I'm pretty sure you just do the up arrow. Sorry, I don't know what that is.
Okay. Because then you can like do cool thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool math you can do.
Cool thing here on formula.
Okay, looks like Lawrence is saying that for exponents we do POW 2, 2. So you do the base and then the exponent. That sounds. Thank you, Lawrence. All right, as you guys are working on that, I'll start doing that on my screen. But if you finish earlier, feel free to send it in the chat and we can take a look at this. No.
How do you divide? What's a division thing?
Yeah, for division, you just use the forward slash
Oh, okay.
on a calculator. And just a reminder, another way to divide would just be to multiply. So you could like multiply by half instead of dividing by 2. All right, what did you guys do for the area? Like, how did you calculate it? Base times height. By 2. All right, and then from this we enter or we calculate the area or display the area. So. Did anyone else do it a different way? Or did everyone else use a similar method? Same thing with different text. Yeah, nice. All right, does anyone have any other questions about this one? Caitlin, I love yours. It's funny. I had a good question. So I didn't mention this when I was talking about the variables, but there is a variable called float, and then there's another variable called double. So those are very confusing words, or very misleading words. Float basically means a decimal, but float has a fixed amount of decimal points that it can go to, and it's quite limited. A double gives you double the amount of decimal points that the float can give, hence the word double. So like Brianna had used float as her variable, but it didn't work until she switched it to double. And that's because she was probably just entering numbers that exceeded the amounts of spaces that the float can hold. So the double was able to hold it, which is why most people don't use float. It's just since the double works more efficiently. The double is for decimals.
Double better than float.
Yeah, double is better than float. Exactly. Oh, I see someone was looking for the hypotenuse. Did you figure it out? Because that could totally work too. That could be a really good problem as well. Oh no. I know it's pretty confusing once you have more parentheses. All right. So thank you guys for listening so well. I know that this is a little bit, I know everyone's on different levels in their knowledge of C++ and programming as well. So hopefully we can sort of try and provide exercises for everyone. Next week we'll be focusing on like logical operators, and we might introduce, we'll do logical operators, and then we'll do some if statements, if else statements, and do some more examples with that. And then next week, I'll try and provide some more examples that can go for a few different difficulty levels. So I don't know if you guys have heard of like the mild, medium, spicy. So I'll try and provide 2 to 3 different levels for each example. So you can sort of pick an example that you think would work best for your comfort level. But yeah, so next week will be if and else statements, conditionals, and then the following week we'll do some more loops and stuff.